Hi everyone. In this video, we'll deal with some respiratory disorders. We are all having a normal respiratory pattern, right? That is normal inspiration, normal expiration, and a normal respiratory rate. Okay, that is 12 respiratory cycles per minute. Okay, and such a condition of having normal respiratory pattern is known by a term eupnea. E-U-P-N-E-A. Okay, eupnea is the normal respiratory pattern. But in some other cases, you can find some abnormalities or alterations in the respiratory rate. Okay, due to some respiratory disorders. Some of the condition I'll just list here. First one is tachypnea. What is tachypnea? Tachypnea is the condition in which there is increase in the rate of respiration. Our normal respiratory rate is 12 respiratory cycles per minute, right? If during some respiratory disorders, you can find this rate of respiration is going beyond 12, okay, beyond the normal level. Such a condition is known as tachypnea, and the opposite condition also you can see, that is bradypnea. Bradypnea is the decrease in the rate of respiration. Okay, if the person is having a mild respiration, mild and decreased rate of respiration, such a condition is known as bradypnea. Okay, and the third condition is apnea. Apnea is mainly seen in some CNS related, some central nervous system related respiratory disorders. What is apnea? Apnea is the temporary stoppage of the breath. Okay, for some period of time, the activity of breathing or respiration completely stops. Okay, it is only for a short period of time and it is temporary also. And such a condition is known as apnea. Okay, and from this you can find all these are certain abnormalities or symptoms of some respiratory disorders. Okay. And not only this, you can find some other respiratory symptoms like hyperventilation. Okay, hyperventilation, that is if there is increase in the rate and force of respiration, it is known as hyperventilation. And the opposite condition is hypoventilation. Hypoventilation is the decrease in the rate and force of respiration. And also dyspnea. Dyspnea, D-Y-S-P-N-E-A. Dyspnea is the difficult, that is if the person is striving to breathe, that condition is known as dyspnea. Okay, so all these are some symptoms you can find during some respiratory disorders. Now we are moving on to the actual respiratory disorders, which are the major or important respiratory disorders. Okay, first of all, the most important respiratory disorder is hypoxia. What is hypoxia? Hypoxia is the reduced availability of oxygen to the tissue. Okay, you know the importance of oxygen. Oxygen is an essential entity for all the metabolic reactions in the body. Okay, if oxygen is not provided to the cells, it does not perform the metabolic activities and yield energy. Okay, so oxygen is very much essential for all the cells for the energy production reaction. Okay, so this hypoxia is the condition in which there is reduced availability of oxygen to tissues. Okay, if the tissues does not get oxygen, such a condition is known as hypoxia. Hypoxia is of 4 types. Okay, first one is hypoxic hypoxia. Second one is stagnant hypoxia. Third one is anemic hypoxia. And fourth one is histotoxic hypoxia. Okay, so these are the subcategories or types of hypoxia. And first we'll deal with the hypoxic hypoxia. Okay. What is hypoxic hypoxia? It is the condition in which there is reduced availability of oxygen into the blood. Okay, only if the oxygen, if there is enough oxygen content in the blood, it can goes to tissue. Okay, if there is no proper diffusion, or if there is any pulmonary ventilation disorders, what happens? The oxygen will not move into the blood. So naturally, eventually what happens? The cells won't get oxygen. Okay, so reduced availability of oxygen to the blood is known as hypoxic hypoxia. Okay, it can be caused by different causes. First of all, low oxygen tension in atmosphere, and it can also be caused by certain respiratory disorders. Okay, what do you mean by low oxygen tension in the atmosphere? If the atmosphere cannot provide enough amount of oxygen to the body, okay, suppose for example, if a person is standing in a high altitude region, okay, above the sea level, particularly in a high altitude, if a person is residing, what happens? The high altitude region will be having a low atmospheric pressure of oxygen. Okay, in high altitude the air will be too thin and the oxygen tension will be too low, atmospheric pressure is also too low, so enough oxygen won't be getting into the body through the lungs. Okay, such a condition is low oxygen tension. And also if the person is residing in a room with closed ventilation, okay, if there is no proper ventilation in a room, the person will feel will face respiratory difficultness, okay, by means of low oxygen tension in the region. Okay, and also it can be caused by certain respiratory disorders. Okay, so some respiratory disorders of the pulmonary ventilation, that is, if the respiratory passage is blocked, air won't move in. Okay, and also if there is any problem with respiratory center, if there is depression of respiratory centers, we know that respiratory centers are the brain centers which control respiration. Okay, so if the respiratory center is not working properly, it is not giving impulses properly, what happens? The activity of respiration will be abnormal. Okay, when proper ventilation won't be occurring, oxygen won't come into the lungs. And respiratory disorders due to like pulmonary ventilation. And if there is lack of oxygen diffusion into the blood, okay, it is also coming under respiratory disorders. Okay, lack of oxygenation of blood. First of all, if there is any problem with pulmonary ventilation, if there is any problem of air getting into the lungs. Okay, second one, even if the air has crossed the respiratory tract, if the air is not able to diffuse into the blood, that is also a cause of hypoxia. Okay, it can be due to pulmonary edema or pulmonary pneumonia or emphysema. All these are certain conditions caused by accumulation of fluid within the alveoli. Okay, by the accumulation of fluid within the alveoli, what happens? The air won't diffuse across the alveoli and get into the blood. So blood won't be getting oxygen. Okay, and in some other cases, like if the alveoli is non-functional, or if the alveoli is collapsed means alveoli is shrunk. Okay, it cannot accommodate air within it. Okay, so all these are certain respiratory disorders which can interfere with the diffusion of oxygen into the blood. Okay, and this is all about the hypoxic hypoxia. And second one is anemic hypoxia. Second one is anemic hypoxia. Okay, from the name implies itself, you can understand the characteristics of this hypoxia. Okay, in this anemic hypoxia, there won't be any problem with the oxygen tension in the atmosphere. There won't be any problem with the respiratory passage or ventilation. There won't be any problem with alveoli and diffusion. What is the only problem here? Problem is now with the blood. Okay, even if there is a proper diffusion of oxygen into the blood, if the blood is unable to carry that oxygen, such a condition is known as anemic hypoxia. Okay, the lack of ability, the inability of the blood to carry oxygen. Okay, which are the causes for that? First of all, decreased RBC and hemoglobin. Okay, you know that which part of the blood carries oxygen? It is of which cells? It is obviously RBC. Okay, within the RBC there is a pigment called hemoglobin. So by means of this, with the help of this hemoglobin, the oxygen is carried into the cell. Okay, and that particular complex is known as oxyhemoglobin. If there is a decrease in the RBC content in the blood, obviously the hemoglobin will be decreased. Okay, and due to some anemia is the destruction of RBC and thereby the decrease in RBC and hemoglobin. Okay, such a condition, the blood cannot carry proper oxygen with it. Okay, and some other conditions like altered hemoglobin. Okay, there is normal amount of RBC, but the hemoglobin in the RBC can sometimes be abnormal. Okay, normal hemoglobin will combine with oxygen, but sometimes this hemoglobin can bind with some other entities like chlorate or nitrate. Okay, in such a case, what is happening? We know that hemoglobin is only producing a physical combination with oxygen. Okay, it does not a chemical combination. It is only physical combination. Whenever the time comes, it dissociates. Whenever the time, when it demands, it will again combine like that. But some chemicals will attach and will make this hemoglobin oxidized. Okay, we know that the hemoglobin is having an iron atom, right? It is in ferrous state, Fe2+. Okay, and by combination with certain other chemicals like chlorate and nitrate, what is happening? This ferrous state of atom will oxidized into ferric, Fe3+. Okay, so in such a case, the hemoglobin thus obtained is known as methemoglobin. Okay, such a methemoglobin can no longer combine with oxygen. Okay, so the oxygen cannot be carried properly. By this condition also, you can find anemic hypoxia. And also, if the hemoglobin is combining with other gases other than oxygen, combination with other gases like carbon monoxide. Okay, the hemoglobin is having lot more affinity towards carbon monoxide than it do with oxygen. Okay, so in all these cases, you can find the inability of blood to carry oxygen, and such a condition is known as the anemic hypoxia. Okay. And third category of hypoxia is stagnant hypoxia. What is the term stagnant? Stagnant means still. Okay, you might have heard stagnant water and running water. Stagnant water means it will be having a low movement. Okay, low velocity of movement. Okay, stagnant hypoxia, that means if the blood is having a low velocity, okay, if the blood flow is having a less velocity, such a case is known as stagnant hypoxia. In this condition, what happens? there is a proper amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. There is no problem with the respiratory tract. There is no problem with ventilation, no problem with diffusion, no problem with the contents in the blood. But what happens if the blood flow is too low? The cells won't get proper oxygen. Okay, the blood should be having a constant velocity. Okay, so as to the cell to get oxygen. The stagnant hypoxia can sometimes be caused by polycythemia. Okay, what is polycythemia? Polycythemia is the abnormal increase in RBC of the blood. Okay, if the RBC cells in the blood is increasing beyond a normal level, what happens? The blood will be too viscous. Viscous means difficult to move. Okay, viscous means thick. The blood will be too thick by the accumulation of all the RBC. Okay, so what happens? The blood will move slowly. Okay, such a condition is known as polycythemia, that is increase in the RBC. And certain other condition also you can see by which this stagnant hypoxia can occur, that is hemorrhage. Hemorrhage known as bleeding. Okay, if the person is having bleeding, that means loss of blood. What happens? The remaining blood will move very slowly. Okay, and next one is vasospasm. Vasospasm means, vaso means vessels, blood vessels. Spasm means constriction or contraction. Okay, if the blood vessels is constricting abnormally by means of some neural or hormonal abnormalities, these blood vessels can constrict. Okay, so it makes poor blood flow to the cells. Okay, and by means of cardiac failure also, if the heart is having some problem with pumping of the blood. We know that heart is a relay station. Okay, heart is the pumping organ. All the blood from the body will go into heart. What will the heart do? Heart will squeeze or heart will pump the blood to all the parts of the body. Okay, it increases the velocity of blood flow. But what happen if the heart fails to do this function? The blood will flow very slowly. Okay, so these are some conditions you can find during the stagnant hypoxia. Okay, it is even if the blood is having oxygen, if the blood is poorly, that is slowly moving, the cells won't get proper oxygen. Okay, and fourth one is histotoxic hypoxia. What is histotoxic hypoxia? In histotoxic hypoxia, there won't be any problem with anything. Okay, only the problem is with cells. There would be enough oxygen in the atmosphere. The respiratory tract is intact. Diffusion or oxygenation of blood is intact. Blood is also having no problem. Enough RBC it is having. But what is the only problem? The cell, the inability of cell to utilize that oxygen. Even if proper amount of oxygen is provided by the cell, by the blood, the cell will be having little inability to utilize or grab that oxygen. Okay, or if it is provided, of course. Okay, oxygen is provided into the cell, but the cell cannot utilize it for metabolic reactions. Okay, in some cases, we know that for all the metabolic reaction to occur, it has to be catalyzed by certain enzymes. Okay, enzymes are very essential for the metabolic reaction. Even if the cell will take the oxygen, it cannot utilize it properly because of the lack of enzymes. Okay, so because of the lack of enzymes, what happens is metabolic reactions will not be occurring. So the cell cannot utilize the oxygen. Okay, such a condition is known as histotoxic hypoxia. mainly during, for example, during cyanide poisoning. Okay, the cyanide poisoning will destroy the enzymes for metabolic reactions. So in the absence of this enzyme, even if the cell is provided with oxygen, the cell cannot utilize it properly. Okay, and such a condition is known as histotoxic hypoxia. So that's all about it. That's all about hypoxia. Okay, there are certain other respiratory disorders that we'll discuss in the next video. Thank you.